Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm Kathy, and this season is dedicated to exploring the unique world of raising boys. Parenting boys today can feel like trying to crack a complicated code, a mystery, especially when it comes to understanding their inner emotional world. Together, we'll dive into real life stories, share practical tips, and uncover insights to help you and your son thrive, not just survive. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's unlock the parenting code, one boy at a time. Welcome back to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm your host, Kathy, and today I'm excited to welcome Myanah Simmons. Myanah is a passionate advocate for growth, resilience, and connection. With a career spanning project management, mental health counseling, and leadership as a former diversity, equity, and inclusion board member, she has made it her mission to inspire and empower others to thrive despite life's challenges. Myanah is also the mother of two boys. Myanah, thank you for coming today and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So, Myanah, your boys are now 18 and 9. Is that right?
10 actually just had a birthday, so officially a
Okay.
10-year-old.
Okay, so
Never
you've got
thought
both
we
of
could
them
get it.
in both of them are now in the double digits, right?
Right, yeah, yeah.
Well, as a mom, as a single mom, with that age span, you're parenting two very, very different stages of boyhood. What's one thing that you wish other parents knew about the emotional needs of boys in those two very different stages of development?
I'd say recognizing that their needs look a bit different in terms of parental guidance. So, for example, my youngest, we really work on identifying his emotions, putting a name to it, understanding what's happening for him, normalizing his emotional experiences. Whereas for my oldest, it's more hands off. At that point, it's kind of allowing him to navigate those emotions, making sure that he has, he knows I'm in his corner, but I'm not stepping in to keep him from having those emotions because all of that is an important part of becoming an adult, knowing how to handle his anger, how to handle anxiety, those types of things. So, yeah.
Okay. Um, what's been the most surprising thing, the differences that have affected you?
In terms of their ages,
Everything, yes.
everything. So I did not grow up in a house with boys in it. So I feel like every part of their development was an aha new moment for me. It was kind of like, oh, okay, well that wasn't that way for me as a teenager, but if that's, what you're experiencing, then let's talk about that. Let me, tell me more about that and really being curious about their development and their emotional needs and their social experiences because as a girl, high school is a completely different experience, or even the way that they play was different. Like as a girl, wanted to be all dressed up and bake and do things like that. And my youngest is all about taking things apart and jumping off of things and just much more active and curious in ways that I wasn't. So that really forced me to be curious and kind of expand my understanding of what it meant to be a child, and what behaviors were acceptable, honestly.
How did you manage to do a lot of that? Like I had the same experience. Like when I have a son and I was raised mostly in a highly populated female group of family members. And when he came along, it really was, I don't really have a playbook for this. I don't know what's going on. I had the benefit of a strong, supportive partner with me to play that role as the father mentor. How did you manage it? Like that's quite a big job to be doing as a single mom.
I I really tried to stay in tune with the parts of me that didn't know and research. So I have um different books that I've read about, the development of boys and educating boys and life lessons that are good for boys to know. Really trying to create that open communication so that they would feel comfortable coming to talk to me about anything, even if it was something that I didn't directly know how to help with
Mhm.
or didn't, necessarily understand or relate to. I wanted them to be able to come to me for everything that they're experiencing. Um, and having grace with myself because there are times where they have things going on and it's like I haven't experienced that. I don't have a direct correlation or example to be able to give you, but let's figure it out together. Like let me support you the best way that I know how because this is a blind spot for me. So we'll learn together, we'll work through it together, apologizing, when I misstep, being able to take ownership of things that sometimes you have the best intentions and it's not the right thing for that particular child. So,
Right. So when you were raising your boys, so I understand that perspective, of the need to be learning more and then trying to apply that and acknowledging that, you don't have all the answers because, you're a girl, so you don't have all the answers. But did you were you fortunate enough to have people around you to, especially as your boys got older or are getting older, where there was like someone in the church or someone, a coach or, an uncle or in your neighborhood, somebody that they were able to connect with as kind of a male role model?
yes. So I always looked for opportunities for them to connect with positive male role models, whether that was them being in sports and connecting with their coaches, different mentorship programs that I was able to connect them with here in our city. So, and church, summer camps,
Okay.
all of those sorts of things. They would connect with certain teachers even.
Mhm.
So thankfully, yes, I was able to find ways for them to still experience having positive male engagement.
Okay, because I know that that's really quite important, especially as they're going through the teens. Like you said,
Yes.
they are pushing back a little bit because they are becoming more independent and knowing that they are going to be on their own. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about the 18-year-old. And
Mhm.
because um, that period is quite like it's dramatic, where that first time that they're going to leave the security of their home, perhaps, and move into another environment. What kind of conversations? Like I remember that period really, really well. And what kind of, preparation do you have or conversations that you're having with your eldest about that transition into adulthood?
Initially, I approached it as kind of life skill development. So, I had him, help me with laundry so he could learn how to do his own laundry. Had him cooking dinner one day a week so he'd learn his way around the kitchen. Tried to show him, my financial information, not in depth, of course, but just letting him see my budget, explaining to him like, okay, this is what gross is versus net. These are things to consider when you're trying to find a place to live. Like trying to have all of those types of conversations. And then also I tried to use any social experiences that he's had with his friends in high school to supplement what he might experience when he's living on his own. So being aware of the people that you keep around you, but not just in a way of friendship. Be careful who you let into your home. Like that's your sacred space. So you don't want to just have everyone staying there or taking advantage of the fact that you have a place, maybe want to sleep on your couch or things of that sort, having those types of conversations too. Um, it's tough. It
Yeah.
is tough. I will say emotionally for me, I do go back and forth with feeling like, did I prep him enough? Like, is there something that I had not yet talked about that, he's going to get out there on his own and he's going to be like, man, I wish my mom would have talked to me about this. So every time I think of something, it's like, hey, come here real quick. I want to talk to you about this thing. I'm sure he's so tired of it by now, but I want him to know any last bits that I can pour into him before he's, out there in the world on his own.
Yeah, it's a really difficult um, point in life for a mom, I think, and you want there's no way that you can possibly prepare them for everything, um,
Mhm.
but there's always a whole lot of guilt of thinking if you miss something out. But in general, I think those kids where there's been intentional preparation, they have a better time at being out in the real world. They might face as many challenges or hardships, but because they've got that really good relationship, even though they're not living with you, they can still, bring it back home and find out what mom would have said about that and just, help guide them on. This is not one of the questions I had written, but as you were talking, it's kind of I know when our son went, actually, he went to another country to go to university, and he was such a big part of our world. It was that whole empty nest syndrome is a real thing, and one of the things that was the most difficult for me was the society that he was going to be in. And so it was there are so many there were so many stories, kind of nuances about being a young man in North America. And not a lot of them are really positive. And so that filled me with quite a bit of fear that I tried desperately not to show about, him being a young man, a bicultural man, and worried about was that going to negatively impact how people looked at him, how people treated him, regardless of what a sweet young man he was. Um, but that gave me, some sleepless nights. And I wonder, like you're living in the States, and I wonder how much more intense that must be.
Yeah. It is scary. It's very scary to be raising a black man with the current climate in the country. Um, and it's almost such that you have to compartmentalize it. Because if I truly sat and felt and thought about all the things that could possibly happen when he's out there on his own, I wouldn't be able to be present for the moments that I'm having with him now before he's out there.
Yeah.
And I don't want him to live in fear. I want him to be educated and aware, but I don't want him to walk around thinking that he's always in danger or that the world is this horrible, dangerous place that he can't experience, joy and peace. So I try not to bring all of that to him. We have had conversations about some things when they're, happening in the news or when he's had different experiences with his friends, and just making sure that he has the space to process that and that he understands, again, the climate of the world that he's going to be stepping into, but also letting him know that it's his world too. He has a place out there. He deserves to experience the same things, the same level of happiness, the same levels of success, all of those things, and not to let someone else's ignorance hinder that. So, yeah, I think that's really, it feels like the most that I can do right now for him. Yeah.
Well, and there's just a real big part, I think, that you have to trust that all the parenting that you've done up till that point is going to click in, and you have to trust in your child.
Yeah.
What about some of the challenges that boys face, like either son actually, and that any time in their life, like connected with stereotypes about masculinity, about, how they're supposed to be a boy. Have you come across any of that? And if you have, like, how have you dealt with some of those issues?
Yes. So my youngest is much more of the kind of outspoken, live out loud, very creative, likes what he likes kind of kid. And so he's had moments where he wanted something that socially would have been attributed to a girl. For example, there was a purse that he wanted. He loved like it was multicolored and like had glitter all over it and things like that. And he just loved it, wanted it. And so having to deal with the responses of others of him having that somehow meant that there was a problem,
Mhm.
rather than he's expressing himself. Like this is what this thing makes him happy. This is what he likes right now. Tomorrow it'll probably be something different, but today this is what brings him joy. And just allowing him to experience that. It was kind of unfortunate to see that adults around him wanted to put him in a box of like, this is what boys do. They like these colors. They don't carry this. Just things. So really making sure that when he's with me, when he's at home, it's however you need to express yourself. Whatever makes you happy. If that's what brings you joy, then let's go for that. And trying to shield him as much as I can from those negative responses from other people.
Yeah, it's really hard. Once they start in the school system, that's when
Mm.
I notice that's when the spark starts to go out and they don't understand why, the pink shirt that they have on that they've loved all the way up through their childhood is now suddenly being, you know, they're being embarrassed about wearing it. Like those are really good conversations to have. And I think when our boys know that that's the real world, some people are not as open-minded and you know flexible in their thinking. But as long as they know that at home they can
Mhm.
express themselves and be as vulnerable as they care to. I think that's the real core of what helps our boys stay solid, even when society might be kind of knocking them down a bit.
Right.
What do you think is a particular parenting challenge that we have as moms raising boys?
Hmm. That's a good question. So the first thing that popped up for me actually relates to the fact that as a single mother, dating is still a part of my life. And so figuring out how to navigate that um, when you're raising kids in general, but
Hmm.
I think for me it was also a consideration because I have boys of what type of example of man they are exposed to or what relationships they have with any men that were brought into my life because I know that they're looking for those connections and someone to model themselves after. And so really trying to be cognizant of who they were exposed to. And sometimes because I'm trying to be so careful with that, it can limit on a personal level the things that you are able to do or the time that you have or the way that relationships can progress. And I wish that there was more of a reality check, I guess I would say, in the dating world of that. Like when someone is a mother, they do not have all the time in the world to be available for you. They have children to tend to. They need to be present for their children. They need to make sure that you're fully vetted before you meet their children. And then also, for those of us as moms out there in the dating world of being aware of like your kids are watching and the things that you think they don't hear, they hear. They notice all of those little nuances of things that happen. So I'm even careful about like conversations that my kids can overhear because I don't want them to have any um, misunderstandings or misinterpretations of because they heard this, piece of a conversation, they now feel like they have an understanding of what's happening or what's going on or anything like that. So I would say that is something that is still ongoing, of course, because I have the age gaps that I do.
Mhm.
So something that I do have to constantly be cognizant of is making sure that I'm kind of limiting their exposure to any dating experiences that I have.
I would think that one of the, that everyone deals with, but when you are with somebody, it's not just them that's coming into your world. It's also their history, their baggage. And a lot of people, I would say the majority of people, are not aware of their own unconscious gender biases. And it's not something that usually comes up in conversation before something comes up. And that's one of the areas that I think is really challenging because when you have somebody coming in, you haven't spent that time with them beforehand. Like they haven't been part of your world for a long, long time so that you know those things. And those are big issues. Those are really big issues that might not come up until they start to have a deeper relationship with your children themselves. So that's really tricky. That's a hard place to be in.
Absolutely. And I think as a mom, you have to have your boundaries. You have to be okay with letting someone go if you know that they're not going to be able to be supportive in the way that you would for your child. So you may not know ahead of time, like you were saying, you don't know until a moment happens.
Mhm.
But when you see those things that are concerning, having those conversations, number one, to speak with that person, like, hey, I recognize that this may be how you handle things, when you were growing up, but this is what's important for me with my kids. This is how I respond. This is how I'd like for you to respond. Having those conversations. And if they're not willing to be flexible and adapt to creating that positive environment for your child, then being okay with letting them go.
That's kind of like the mama bear thing. And I don't think it's just with new relationships. I think even if you're in a long-term relationship that's been around for a while, if you feel that there's anything that's negatively, like seriously negatively impacting your kids, that's where your boundaries, often come in. So yeah, we do. We put our children first. They are our first priority. When you're thinking about the boys' future, both of them, what's your biggest fear about their future?
That they will start to pursue someone else's definition of success
Mhm.
versus their own. Um, I've tried to encourage them to figure out what success looks like for them or what their vision is for their lives. Now, of course, the ages they are now, it's probably going to change three, four times over, in the next few years. But just encouraging them to make sure that they are defining that. They're not trying to work towards some societal standard of who they should be. If you're happy being, that small farmer in a little town and maybe, has a very simple life and that's peace for you, then that's it. You don't have to be, an entrepreneur and, a real estate tycoon. And you don't have to do that. Just
Yeah.
figure out what makes you happy, what brings you peace.
Yeah. It often comes around happiness and safety, doesn't it? Like
Mhm.
those are safety is often the biggest fear for me. Just, you know, always wanting to make sure that he's safe and healthy. And that includes happiness, and because that includes mental health as well as physical health. So that kind of segues well into because you have a counseling practice, I was wondering, what do you notice is often misunderstood when it comes to, effective, really positive ways of nurturing boys' mental health and emotional growth?
I would say probably being able to manage what's happening for them during that exploration of their identity. I think that as adults, especially if we've come from an era of the kind of old school way of thinking, we tend to assume that things are meant to be a certain way, and that really isn't the case. For example, um, recognizing that as a teenager, going through all of those hormonal changes, his emotions are also going up and down and kind of all over the place. And some days he might be having a bad day. And it's not something that, he's meaning to be disrespectful toward me, or he's meaning to, be um, inconsiderate or not willing to, cooperate, anything like that. He's human. He's a teenager having a bad day, just like it would happen to me. And so being able to understand the humanity of that period for them and how much they're struggling to just keep it all together, and having that compassion.
Compassion is probably my favorite word there because I don't think our boys get enough compassion in general. I think the expectations that we have on them, um, they're not appropriate expectations. And so, um, especially in those years, like it's for if you think about it as if your eldest was your daughter, well, you would understand how her hormones are changing, fluctuating each month as she goes through a cycle. So you'll give her a little bit more leeway, a little more space when it's that time of the month that her emotions are wreaking havoc on her world. But we don't have that same compassion and understanding for what's going on to with our young boys when their hormones, when their testosterone, it's just all over the place, and it's, messing up with their emotions and their, clarity of thinking. And the saddest thing of it, like, I don't know if you've noticed this in your practice or not, but I think so many times the young boys in that particular stage, when they do act out, or, when their behavior is changing, partly because they're not able to get adequate sleep that they need to function properly, but they don't know why. Like if you ask them, why do you seem to be angry all the time? Like, why this, why that? And if they feel safe enough to really, give the true answer, they will say, I don't know. I don't know why, but that's just how I'm feeling right now. So I don't think that we really understand what they're going through, what, the hormones are doing to how they're able to function. And so they need more compassion, definitely, than we do give them. Do you see any of that in your practice? Are you mostly with adults?
I do work a lot with adults, but I have worked with kids of different ages and teenagers, and even just my experience with my own. I've noticed that for boys, it seems that the range of emotions that they're allowed to experience socially is very limited. For example, anytime a boy expresses that they're angry or that they are frustrated or irritated or whatever that might look like for them, it can be seen as aggression, even if it's not being expressed that way.
Hmm.
And they seem to be, more quickly judged as dangerous or threatening or, acting out when they're really just experiencing an emotion that's totally valid and completely applies to, the experience that they're having. It's just not, they're not given the space to feel that. Sadness. So they can be sad, but they can't cry, or they can be sad, but they can't have any sort of outward expression of that. It's almost like they have to be stoic and kind of just let it go, and they're not supposed to be, quote unquote, bent out of shape in any way when they're experiencing those things. And I don't think that's fair at all. That can be really challenging as a teenager because
Hmm.
the up and down. So then
Yeah.
it's how do you manage that when you're being told that there's so many things that socially are unacceptable?
Did you find like when, especially with your eldest son, when he was growing up, was there any time when like something happened and you kind of checked yourself? He showed something and you thought, "Oh, I didn't know a boy would do that." Like even though you know your son really well. Did you ha ever have an experience like that?
Hmm. I don't know if I had something that was kind of that I didn't know, something happened emotionally that I didn't know. I didn't express, I didn't expect something to impact him as deeply as it did. For example, um, so his very first relationship or, experience in dating, of course, it's high school. So that means, you see each other in the hallways, and that's pretty much it at that age. They're not doing a whole lot. So to me, I felt like it was kind of a temporary thing, something much lighter. But when they split, when they were no longer talking, he was really upset. And that surprised me, the level of the emotion that he was experiencing. And it was kind of like, oh, okay. So even though for me, this seemed like some, high school crush,
Yeah.
brush it off kind of thing, for him, it was very intense. He was crying. He kind of wanted to stay in bed, didn't want to come out of his room, didn't want to really engage in his usual activities. And that surprised me because again, for me, I had taken it as just,
Yeah.
something simple to be pushed aside and like, oh, that, he'll get over that in no time. But it really upset him. And it was a reality check for me to remember that it's not about my interpretation of his experiences. It's about what the experience truly is for him. Like for me, I may think that, it doesn't look like something that warrants that level of emotion, but that doesn't mean that that's how it feels for him. So,
Yeah, I don't think that we have enough recognition on, how deep their emotions are, because we don't allow them to show those, very much in society. And then the sad thing is that the longer they have to hide those and push those feelings down, the more difficult it can be for them to be able to express them, even if they're in a safe space.
right.
Um, what has been, so I know we've been talking a little bit about, kind of the struggles and hardships of with boys, but what would you say is probably the the best experience you had being a boy mom?
The love. Now, I don't have daughters, but boy mom love is just, it's a very beautiful thing. Like it's so adorable to me to see how they almost want to protect you.
Yeah.
they, even at a very young age, they want to kind of be involved in like, oh, mom, do you need help with this? Can I help you carry this? I can lift it, heavy things they want to carry and try to fix things and all of that. And then just the ways that they lean in to you for affection. So being able to know that, yeah, you're playing basketball with your friends and you're this big tough teenager or whatever outside, but then you come home and you want to hug and you want to, sit and watch a movie with me and you want to. So yeah, that is
Mhm.
amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, it's often said that little boys are meant for their moms. Like that's that connection with a between a son and a mom is something that's really unique. And I think it's because probably dads and daughters maybe have a similar thing, but yeah, I think it's the most beautiful thing. Um, so with little boys today, so today's society is a little bit different because there's, like since, the 2000s, 2010, 12, because of the internet and social media and technology and all of that. And definitely it is impacting how our children are viewing childhood and how they're managing things through childhood. I was just reading, I'm just in almost at the end of reading the book called The Anxious Generation. And again, I think there's more conversations happening around screen time and social media, especially since the Netflix documentary series there. But how is that? Like, I never had to really deal with that very much in when I was raising our son because he's 31 now. So it wasn't in your face like it is now. And I just wonder, how do moms really navigate that one? Because that's a big part of their lives now.
Yes, it is. It really is. And I'd say I've seen the full spectrum of everything from parents who want their child to have, no exposure to technology. They don't have phones, they don't have video games. They can only watch, a limited amount of programs on television to those who their kids kind of go unmonitored out into the world of technology and they have all the things and they can see and be exposed to anything that they want. And I think in our household, I'm probably more of middle of the road in a sense. So, um, my children have had video games, do monitor those. So I do pay attention to what is the content of the game, what is it, how if you're able to communicate with others, because it seems like everything nowadays involves some aspect of chat or
Mhm.
call or something. So making sure that if that's a part of the game, like I'm aware of that and I use that to decide, do I want you to be able to play with this? This is mainly for my younger one,
Yeah.
but kind of do I want you to have access to that? Using every parental control I can find, every source of monitoring that I can, even to the TV. So I have, pin ratings set up for the things that he's able to watch. We do have agreements. So he reads in exchange for having a certain amount of time to do something else. So you
Hmm.
want to, play on your VR, you want to watch something on Disney Plus is his absolute favorite thing right now. So something like that, then I want you to come read a chapter to me. So kind of that
Beautiful.
trade-off.
Mm.
Um, I think, and I know that it is a hot topic right now, and there can be a lot of criticism, um, either way. But I think as a parent and with your household, you really got to figure out what's working for you. Being educated enough to understand the implications, right? You want the information, you want to make an educated decision on how you approach it, but figuring out what balance of that would be right for your home.
Yeah, I think that's one of the confusing parts of it, though, is that research is just starting to come out as far as the implications of like
Mhm.
social media on mental health and that. So that's another area that's being talked about more now than it was in the past. But this, what they're calling like the boy crisis and the spike in suicide rates and talking about the loneliness that a lot of our young boys are feeling. Has any of that impacted your world, or is it something that you've talked about, especially with your eldest one, or that it's, come into your practice? Like, has that been part of your world yet?
With my oldest, we had a period of time where I had conversations with him about engaging in person. I do feel like because of the access to things like chat and Instagram and all the things, it's almost as though they would rather be communicating with people via internet than having that face-to-face conversation and getting out of the house and going to meet a friend at the movies or something like
Yeah.
that. So having those conversations about, hey, like I would like to see you meet up with your friends, like instead of spending time trying to connect with them virtually, can we connect with them in person? Like, can we, invite them to the movies? I'll take you guys to, this place or that place. So I have had to try to steer him away from spending too much time trying to connect just on the internet or being overly engaged with people via internet, and also explaining to him the value of in-person relationships, because the other thing that scared me was the number of people who are on the internet catering to kids, and like the men, they're grown men but they're pretending to be
Yeah.
a child or a teenager on the internet, or a girl or whatever. So I also wanted him to be aware of that. It's that if you have not had a live engagement with this person, I don't want you to feel that you truly know them. This is
Mm.
someone that you may have just, there's someone you play games with, there's someone you communicate with on the internet, and that's fine. But I don't want you to feel like that person is someone that you truly know, that you would want to be completely vulnerable with, that you feel like should be, trusted with your utmost private things, because you haven't met them. You don't actually know them. So,
So we used to talk an awful lot about stranger danger, like and
mhm.
again, that was, trying to keep them safe, keep them aware without, kind of scaring them to death about the world that they're living in. But that's kind of where the problem comes with things like social media and connecting with people online. We haven't had some of those conversations. Many parents have not had those conversations where you are talking about, stranger danger, really. And it's almost more terrifying because it's so easy to fool somebody who is naive and innocent and yeah, that's a tough one.
Yes. And with the advances in technology, even that makes it that much scarier, because they can change their voice and they
Yeah,
can have a whole an AI image of themselves, and now you really think that you're on a video call with a young girl or
yeah,
small and it's not that. And so those conversations, I do feel they're important, because technology is only going to continue, growing and
yeah,
becoming advanced, and kids are being exposed to it at a younger and younger age. Even at school now, my youngest, is on the computer for most of his
Gloria.
assignments.
Yeah,
So having it around is, something that's going to be unavoidable, and being able to educate them on how to be safe on
yeah.
it is super important.
I agree. When you think about mental health and the mental health crisis that is with boys today, and be because you have an understanding both professionally and as a mom personally, what do you think is the most important thing for your son to understand about mental health so that when he does have those dips or depression or anxiety, that he knows there are ways to deal with it?
First, I've encouraged him to treat mental health much like you would treat like your dental hygiene or your physical health, is that you don't need to wait until you're in an absolute crisis to go to therapy, to have regular check-ins with a therapist, just talking through different things, making sure that you keep your, mind fresh on your coping skills and have you been keeping up on your self-care. It's kind of that check-in thing. So being comfortable with doing that, also recognizing that emotions aren't permanent. So when you're having a period where you're feeling, maybe a lower mood or you're feeling like you don't really feel up to things, having grace with yourself, number one, because if it's a day that you need to stay in the bed and sleep, stay in the bed and sleep. Like that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that that moment can pass, will pass. If it is something that you feel is more heavy and you're kind of feeling like now your level of hopelessness or your level of depression and lack of desire to do things, you're starting to recognize like it's hard to even take a shower, then feeling okay with reaching out,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out who those people are. If it's not me, of course, I want it to be, me. I try to create the space so that they can always come to me. But if it isn't me, knowing who your safe person is and being okay with contacting them and just saying, hey, can you come and sit with me? Maybe not, you don't have to tell them the in-depth thing, but making sure that you're reaching out to someone,
Mm-hmm.
never feeling like you're a burden because everyone around you loves you and they would want to know if they have an opportunity to support you. So, kind of giving that messaging and trying to prep him for keeping those things fresh.
When I remember, similar to you in the way that when I don't know something, I will read and read and read and research and try to figure out, the big picture and everything. And I
Mhm.
remember when our boy was, well, I guess it was around 11 or 12, and I was thinking, okay, he's going to move into the teens. And so I need to prepare for that so that I can support him in the best way. And that's when I started to kind of, you know, dip my toes into the world connected with rites of passage. And I started reading all this stuff, and it was like, it just sounded so cool. It was like, it's something that historically was part of societies and really isn't in many societies today, although in some places it's coming back. But that whole concept of helping a young boy understand that the ways of childhood are to kind of be put behind, and now is the time to be moving into young manhood, basically. But also the idea that in a rites of passage, you would have a group of, in my own framing, exceptional men, like the men that you want your son to look up to, and having those men talk to your son about what it was like for them moving into the teen years and some of the mistakes that they made and they wish they didn't. And just when I have given that a lot of thought or talked to people about it when their children were younger, it was like, it sounds like a really good idea. Like little girls know immediately, like when they have their first cycle, they know that it's time to put away the, you know, little girl world and start to move into the big girl uh, world, and society recognizes it. They have different expectations. It's like, oh yes, so now, they understand her better. But with the boys, there is nothing. There is nothing that gives them that sense of I'm part of the bigger village here. Now I'm moving into the men's village, and so I don't have to do all these bravado things or these reckless things to prove that, I'm moving into manhood. It's been recognized, and I am part of this. What do you think about all that?
I agree with you that a rite of passage ceremony seems like a really cool idea to be able to have because you're right, it'll give that kind of clear point of transition
Hmm.
for them to understand what they're stepping into in terms of being a part of manhood now. And some forms of that, I would say, happen. I feel happen when boys get to kind of the point that my son is at now. So he's about to graduate high school. And he starts to hear more conversations about what it is to be a man and be a provider and consider, that these things are going to be expected of you out there in the world. And so now it's kind of a conversation, and that he hears from the different men that he's around, or he hears his friends, they're having conversations about what it's going to look like for them to be living on their own and having to have a family. And do you want to get married? How many kids? Those sorts of things. And he had a really cool experience. He went to a camp. It was Camp Choya. It's a Christian camp here. And they actually had a kind of a boys' night while he was there. So it was set up with he described it to me because they go stay at the camp by themselves. But he was super excited about it because it's all the boys. They kind of have all the food and they're sitting around, being able to eat with their hands, and they have conversations about just different lessons from the Bible that is important for men to remember. And so he got to have that experience, and I saw how that was really impactful for him. And then going away on a college tour was another experience that I feel like was important for him and for me because it was my first experience of him being away on his own for a couple of weeks. But also, he was away with other positive males and was able to have conversations about the future and what it meant to be a man and things to be aware of. Um, so I really like the idea of the more traditional rites of passage that you read about or hear about, and I think they're beautiful things. I think in small ways we kind of offer that to our boys, but I don't think on that same level, no, I wouldn't say we have anything of equivalency.
Well, I think the things that you were mentioning, very especially the camp, like that. Um, I think that's another issue that we have in society is that there are not as many families that are involved in the church anymore. So those kinds of church camps or, things that like I grew up in the church basically. So I know that world. And if they're not getting it at church, they're not getting it at home. It's kind of like that's where I think that's where you have these lost boys because they don't have any guidance on when they're going through this time of life, and it's a very critical time of life. One of the things that I was wondering about that sometimes helps people, and if they're really intentional or depending on their character, they might have these conversations before they actually have children. But many people, it's after they start having children. But it's really looking at like, what are your core values that you want to give your child? Like, what are the top, three or four things that that you think about? And because the world is changing so fast, it can't be anything that's a thing. Like, it has to be like a value. So if you were thinking about your values, your core values, what is it that what have you been able to let your boys know this is what's really important, and maybe this is what it looks like, or this is what you can do to get to that point.
Great question. What would I say my core values are? I would say truth and honesty. I want them to be honorable men. I want them to be men of their word, understanding, that aspect of it, but then also honesty with yourself, understanding where you have opportunities to grow, where, you may need help, where your blind spots are so that you can evolve, so that you can learn from experiences that you have. Because if you have something happen, but you're not willing to step back and say, okay, why did that happen? What was it that I might have needed to do differently in that situation? What was the cause and effect there? And being able to be honest with yourself about behaviors or patterns that you need to address. So I always want them to be open and honest with themselves and with others, be trustworthy. I would also say being able to be open-minded, having empathy and an open mind for another person's experience. You don't want to assume that you know the extent of a person's life or their experiences. You don't want to go out into the world judging people by, what you see before getting to know them, making sure that you're open to experiencing or getting new information. You may, have one idea about the world at large, but be open to hearing someone else's perspective. You don't have to agree. You just listen, you respect that person's reality. I want them to be able to do that. Loving, I want them to be loving, nurturing, caring, understanding what it is to love and be loved, and the fact that it's not always, the Disney movie version of
Mm.
experiencing love, that sometimes love is an active choice, that someone may disappoint you, or someone may do something that you don't agree with, and you want to be able to continue to love them or understanding what it is to experience love and the level of love that you deserve and never compromise on that. So,
Mm. Beautiful. Before we finish today, Myanah, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to have talked about?
no, actually, I think we really talked about all of the things when it comes to raising boys, when it comes to raising kids in general. And I'm really glad that you brought up the kind of social climate and the experiences that are happening with that, because that is a very real part of conversations that I'm having with my oldest,
Mm.
because he is at that point where he's about to be out there on his own. And whereas now I know what's happening when he comes home every day, I see him come in the door. I know he's home safe. Well, when he's living on his own, I don't get that. And
Mm.
so it's scary.
Yeah, it's definitely a big adjustment. It's an adjustment for them, but it's also a big adjustment for us. And
Hmm.
being able to, you know, be there, but not take over. Like just be there when they need you and when they ask for advice, but let them, kind of take the bull by the horn and hope for the best.
Right. Right.
Myanah, before we end, I always ask my guests two questions that are just for fun. The first one is, what would be the title for a movie about your family life, and what would be a short synopsis or summary?
Uh, so I thought about this a couple of different ways. I'll tell you both that I had. One of them was kind of in a humorous way, and I was thinking of something like chicken nuggets are a food group. Just speaking to uh, the silly parts of having kids and trying to get them to sit down and have dinner at the table, and like, this is what I cooked,
Mm.
I'd like for you to try it, and all they want to do is eat chicken nuggets and french fries. It's kind of like, again, are you not tired of that yet? So that was one, but then also, as long as we're together was the other one that I thought of. I
Hmm.
really want my boys to feel like no matter what happens in the world, no matter what challenges come up, no matter what things go wrong, that as long as we stay together. We continue to love each other, support each other, know that we're there for each other. We can get through anything. And so that would speak to some of the experiences that we've already had, some just small challenges that have happened, and even bigger things that have come up in life, and how we were able to be there for each other and have experiences together that made us stronger.
That's really important, isn't it?
Hmm.
Okay, so now the second question is I want you to picture yourself sharing some wisdom with your child, whichever one is first. I'm guessing it could be the eldest one, as they are entering the world of parenting themselves. What words of wisdom would you have for them?
Be present in every moment that you get to have with your kid because the time goes so fast. Um, know that your child will always value quality time with you over any materialistic thing. Know that you will not always get it right. You're going to make mistakes. There's no handbook to parenting. It doesn't mean that you're a bad parent, that you don't love your child. It just means that you had the best intentions, that thing didn't work out. Be able to have grace with yourself and not, beat up on yourself about it, but learn from it. Keep pushing forward.
Where can listeners connect with you or follow you or
So I do have my practice on Instagram. It's Augustine Counseling and then SVC for service. And then I have my website, so that's augustinecounselingservice.com. And then I am also on Facebook, Augustine Counseling Service as well. So,
okay, I'll make sure that those are in the show notes. And I want to thank you, Myanah. It was really lovely to talk with you today. So thank you for the time that you've given. I know how precious a parent's time is, and I hope you feel your time was honored today.
yes, absolutely. I've loved our conversation and thank you again for having me.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and I am sure that our listeners will walk away with bits of information that are going to make their parenting experience a little bit better. So be sure to check out the links in the show notes below for Myanah. And thank you to the listeners for joining us on Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and tune in next week for more conversations about raising boys. If you're a parent raising a boy in today's complex world, be sure to explore sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll discover expert guidance and support designed to help you unlock your full parenting potential. As Amelia Gambetti says, this job is too difficult and too beautiful to do alone. Together we can explore this adventure and discover the magic of raising boys.